Hi, everyone. We hope you're all well. Thank you for joining us today. At Informa Connect Academy, we offer professional development programs in Dubai, Saudi, Qatar, here in the Middle East, as well as the UK and Australia, with options to attend in person as well as live digital. We now welcome you to this webinar titled The Fundamentals of Managing Compensation. Now, many of you have also registered to attend the Masters series of 12 webinars with Robert that will begin from the 4th of August onwards. For you, this webinar today will serve as the stepping stone for all the upcoming ones. I would like to introduce you to Compensation Guru and your webinar director, Robert Mosley. Well, Robert Mosley is one of the leading global experts on key HR topics in all sectors across the GCC. He was the head of the Middle East practice with Hay Group before joining the Emirates Group to later become the SVP Human Resources. As he said, he now operates his own compensation consultancy called Lemon Pip Consulting in the UK. And at Informa, we are extremely proud to have Robert as one of our senior associates for several years. And he's not only one of Informa's best subject matter experts, he is also one of the best that the industry has to offer. So you've come into this webinar. Please make the most of the time that you have with him on this session. Just a little bit of administrative details. We will upload 2 files into Zoom, which you can download. We'll upload them somewhere around 1 hour into the webinar. The recording of the webinar will be shared with you by next week. Robert will allow time for Q&A towards the end of the session. At that point, you can either choose to type out your questions in the chat and I'll read them out for Robert to answer, or please feel free to use the raise hand function that Zoom allows, and we will give you an opportunity to unmute yourself and ask Robert your question. I'll pass the floor over to Robert now. We hope you enjoy this session.
Lovely. Thank you for the introduction, Mega. And of course, Mega, part of Informa Connect Academy, one of the initiatives by Informa is called HR Observer. And this webinar today and the series of 12 webinars in August are all part of that initiative, the HR Observer, which is really aiming to become the platform in the Middle East to help human resources and human capital professionals interact with each other, get a learning experience and improve their continued professional development. So, timings. I'll do an introduction now for about 15 minutes. 10 o'clock to 10:15 UAE time, 9 o'clock to 9:15 Saudi time. I'll take you through an introduction. And then the main body of the webinar, when I'll deliver the material and take you through the fundamentals of compensation, will be from 10:15 to 11:15 UAE time. That's 9:15 to 10:15 Saudi. And then when I finished the webinar at about 11:15 UAE time, about 10:15 Saudi time, I'll turn to a summary and we'll do a question and answer session. And at that point, you can type in your questions and Informa will take me through them. And if we can, if you raise your hand, we'll even try and see if we can unmute you so you can ask questions. So hold your questions until that final 15 minutes. And roughly about 11 o'clock, roughly UAE time, the 2 files for this webinar will be loaded into the chat screen. So one file is this PowerPoint and the other file is a handout that I'll be using later on. Those 2 files will be uploaded into the chat screen at about 11 o'clock UAE time, and those 2 files will only be available to those of you who are attending live and can download it from the chat screen. If you registered for this webinar and you didn't attend live, but you're now watching a recording, yes, you can get the recording, but no, you can't get the 2 files. You have to be here live today to get those 2 files. So watch the chat box about 11 o'clock, 11:10 UAE time, because 2 files will drop into that chat box as a reward to say thank you for being with us. Here are the files. So we're aiming for about an hour and a half. Here we go. Oh, a weird love heart just floated up my screen and I have no idea what that means. I don't think it's my wife. Fascinating. Okay, so yeah, we're not having any breaks. We're just doing a straight hour and a half. You're all muted, so at the end of the session, we'll either try and let you unmute yourself so you can ask questions verbally, but more likely, because there's hundreds of you today, we will simply let you type your questions in the chat box, and Mega will read out the questions and I'll answer them at the end. Housekeeping notes, this webinar is being recorded. It will be made available to you probably early next week. Takes about a week to do the editing. And it also forms the official introduction webinar for the series of 12 webinars, the Masters series, that are coming up in August. So those of you who are attending the Masters series, any of those webinars in August, this is the introduction webinar. Please don't do any recording or videoing at your end, but the video will be made available to everyone who's attended today and everyone that's registered but didn't attend. The video should be available early next week. And yes, you're on mute. Please wait to the end to ask questions. And at the end, either type your question and Informa will read it out, or if we can, if the technology will let us, raise your hand, Informa will unmute you and you can ask your question in that final 15 minutes. My background, you can read about at any time. 41 years now in human resources, some of which has been in consulting mode, some of which has been in practitioner mode. So I started my career with Corn Ferry, with Hay Group, back in the 1980s. Spent 6 years with Hay, including opening the office in the Middle East in Dubai in 1988. Then, when Emirates was a brand new airline, I joined Emirates as the Senior Vice President for Human Resources, looking after the HR function for 13 years. Then switched to Qatar Airways as the head of HR, the General Manager, Human Resources at Qatar Airways for 3 years. Then joined Travelport Galileo in America as the head of Global Reward. And then in 2009, I formed my own little consulting company, Lemon Pip Consulting, which is just me, all on my own, doing 50% of my time consulting, 50% of my time training on the subjects that I'm really passionate about, which of course is compensation, remuneration, grades, performance, org design, strategic analysis of the HR function, etc. And yeah, things have been going well. In 2021, People Hum and Harvard Business Review put me in their list of top 100 global thought leaders from all subject areas to inspire you in 2021. I think there were just 3 of us from HR, Dave Ulrich, Martin Goldsmith and myself. The rest were finance or transformation or business strategy. 2024, CEO Monthly and Forbes magazine awarded me Best HR Consulting CEO in the world. So that was a very pleasant surprise. And then last year, 2025, my company, Lemon Pip Consulting, which is me, all on my own, Best HR Consulting Firm in the UK and Middle East 2025. And I'm delighted to say that just 2 months ago, we got the award again for 2026. So Best HR Consulting Firm 2026 in the UK and the Middle East. Good. Oh, look, there's more things floating up my screen. I don't know where that comes from. Very clever. So my agenda today, I'm going to start by talking about the golden triangle of reward, sometimes referred to as the 4 Ps. P for position, job, role, same thing. P for position, P for people, P for performance, P for pay. If you're going to attract the staff you need and reward them and motivate them and get them to perform, you need to manage the golden triangle of reward. And I will take you through that golden triangle in detail, and I'll stop at various places and tell you about the latest trends, the shifts in HR best practice, etc. When we go through that golden triangle, we'll start by talking about jobs. Jobs or positions or roles, same thing. We'll look at org design, we'll look at job analysis, we'll look at job descriptions, we'll look at job evaluation, we'll look at grades, and we'll talk about the trends. And this is one area where AI is going to make a really significant impact within 2 years. We'll talk about jobs. We'll talk about the people doing those jobs and how do we manage performance of those people. We'll talk about goal setting in terms of objectives, where it used to be KPIs, then it was OKRs and MSCs. It's not just what you do, objectives, it's also how you do it, behaviours, competencies. How do we do appraisals at the year end? What is best practice today in performance ratings? Because we've had 10 years of experimenting. We're now through the experimentation period. We know what works best. We'll look at that in ratings. We'll talk about the distribution curve as well, because the bell curve is well and truly dead. And we'll talk about the link with pay and performance, merit pay, pay reviews, bonuses, etc. P for positions, otherwise known as jobs, P for people, P for performance, and P for pay. Compensation. What is a pay strategy? Where do we get market data? How do we benchmark our company versus other companies? How do we design the pay scales, the allowances, the bonuses, the benefits, the total reward package? And how do we implement and manage? And then at the end, I'll take you through what is coming up in August, which is next month now, because it's the 1st of July. The Masters series of 12 webinars in August. By far one of the most popular courses that I ever do each year. It will attend hundreds of people, and it is incredibly good value. And it's really aimed at HR people generally who need a really good understanding about compensation, reward, job evaluation, performance, etc. I'll take you through the series of 12 and explain what's coming up next month. So let me start with the golden triangle of HR. On all of my training courses, I always start with this question to delegates. Why do you work? And there'll be somebody that puts their hand up and says, well, I work because I want to develop my professional knowledge and I want to build my career and I want to contribute back to society. And I say, well, that's really, really nice. And if your next pay review is 0, will you still be happy? And of course, the answer is no, they won't be happy. The real reason that people work is to earn money. And when I say money, that's the whole package. Salary, allowances, bonuses, benefits. People work to earn money so that they can pay their rent, go shopping in the supermarkets, bring up the family, go on holidays, afford to drive a car, etc., etc. Money. And if, as a company, as an employer, you want to attract people to come and work for you, and you want to hold on to them and retain them, and you want to motivate them to do well, because ultimately you want your employees to perform, you've got to get money right. Get it wrong, and an employee will be demotivated and they won't perform very well. Get it right, and the employee will then be motivated and performance will improve. And that means that the employee must perceive money as being fair and must perceive money as being competitive. And who is going to manage money? Of course, it's the human resources function. So the human resources function needs to know all about the golden triangle of reward if we're going to manage money. So what is this golden triangle? We have to know all about the different jobs within the company. Jobs, positions, roles, same word. We have to know about the different jobs within the company. What is each job responsible for? What is each job accountable for? And there is a difference between duties, responsibilities, and accountabilities. And we'll dive deeper into that difference in our first webinar on the 4th of August when we look at job descriptions. What does each job contribute towards the business? What decisions is each job involved in? What actions is each job taking? How critical, how important is each job to the company? What are the complexities involved in getting each job done? What are the challenges? What are the risks involved in getting the job done? And then the crucial thing, what are the minimum necessary skills, experience, training, qualifications, education, the minimum necessary needed in order to be able to do the job successfully. Not the ideal, not what the person actually has, but the minimum necessary. Let's put that into a different word. The competencies. Competencies. Spelt C-E-S. Competencies without the letter I. There are two words in the English language that sound exactly the same. Competencies. One of them is spelt C-E-S at the end. The other is spelt C-I-E-S at the end. So this is the C-E-S version. Competencies, spelt C-E-S, the minimum necessary technical skills needed to be able to perform the job successfully. The experience, the training, the education, the qualifications, the certifications, the skills, the minimum necessary technical skills needed to be able to do the job. For example, a taxi driver. Can you drive a car? Do you have a driving license? An absolutely necessary technical skill if you're going to be able to do the job of a driver. We have to know all about the different jobs within the company. Duties and responsibilities were very common 10 years ago, but we've evolved on. We've moved on from responsibilities, do something and this is why, and we've evolved on to accountabilities. Do something and this is why, and this is how we're going to measure you. A responsibility plus goals and objectives and targets is an accountability. And we'll look at that in webinar 1. We've got to know all about jobs. But we might have a job called customer services agent with 15 people doing that job. Do we pay the 15 people the same salary? No. Top performers will get paid more, and new recruits or trainees or people still learning the job or poor performers will get paid less. So yes, we have to know about the jobs that people are doing, but we also have to get to know the people doing those jobs. Especially how well is each person performing. What experience, what seniority, What length of service does each person have within the job? What do we want them to achieve? Their goals, their objectives, and how do we want them to achieve it? The other type of competencies, competencies with an I, the behaviors that will make somebody successful in the job. Competencies, CES, the technical skills, the minimum necessary technical skills needed to do the job. Competencies with an I, CIES, the behaviors, the attitudes that will make somebody successful in the job. For example, a taxi driver. Can you drive a car? Do you have a driving license? That is a necessary technical skill. But do you drive the car safely? Do you stay within the speed limit? Well, that's a behavior. For example, an HR business partner. Do you have a CIPD level 5 qualification in human resources? Have you got a minimum of 5 years experience in the HR function? Well, that's competencies, CES, the technical skills. But can you handle data confidentially? And do you have empathy and care for the employees to whom you're giving an HR business partnership services? Well, that is behaviors. And good performance management is not just what do you do, your goals and objectives, it's also how do you do it, the behaviors. Typically, in an end of year appraisal, 70% of the appraisal will be based on what you achieve, and the other 30% will be based on how you achieve it. Jobs are internal within the company. People and performance are internal within the company. And this dimension here, the relationship between jobs and people, is often called internal equity or internal fairness. Equity, fairness, same thing. Are we treating people in the same job in a fair and similar and equitable manner? Internal equity. Jobs are internal within the company. People and their performance are internal within the company. We've also got to look externally. What is happening outside our company in the market? What are my competitors paying for similar jobs? What are other organisations in the GCC paying for the type of people that I want to recruit and hold on to? Can I afford to pay the same as my competitors? Am I profitable? Or are my profits a little bit squeezed and I have to pay a little bit less than my competitors? Can I afford to pay the same or even perhaps pay a little bit more? And what's happening in the economy, to the employment market, to supply and demand? Because right now, cybersecurity experts and AI specialists are in huge demand, low supply. And when demand is high and supply is low, the price of a job goes up, which is why, at the moment, cybersecurity jobs and AI jobs are paid about 30% more than jobs of similar sizes in other functions. A 30% market pay premium at the moment for AI and cybersecurity. What's happening in the employment market, supply and demand, and what's happening in the economy to inflation, to cost of living, which isn't very high in the GCC at the moment, only about 2%, compared to Europe at about 4%, Asia, Malaysia, China at about 6%, the subcontinent, India, Pakistan at about 8%, and a whopping 18% in Egypt, 33% in Iran, and over 1,000% in Venezuela. What's happening to inflation? This dimension, jobs and market, well, that's all about external competitiveness. Internal equity on the left, external equity or external competitiveness down the right. And then lastly, of course, at the bottom, we've got pay for performance. The three legs of the golden triangle. We have to know all about jobs within the company. We have to know all about the people doing those jobs and how well each person is performing within the company. And we have to measure and monitor and understand the external market. And this is called the golden triangle of reward. And who is going to manage this triangle? Of course, it's the HR function. So how does HR cope with this triangle? What are the processes that HR need to know and need to be following? Well, let's start with jobs. The first process is organization design. What goes where? Strategic organization design. Maybe here is the head of finance, and under finance, I might put tax and treasury, accounting, financial planning, FP&A and admin and budgeting, and maybe procurement. And under tax and treasury, I might have tax, I might have treasury. Under accounting, I might have financial accounting, management accounting, asset accounting, etc., etc. How am I going to structure the company? Strategic OD, what goes where? Should I put procurement under finance, or should I put procurement under supply chain? What goes where? And when you've got the first draft of your org chart, you can look at one particular job and you can ask yourself, why do we need this job? Job analysis. The fundamental questions of job analysis. Why do we need this job? What does this job have to achieve? What is this job responsible for? What is this job accountable for? And what do we, the company, expect the employee in that job to achieve, to perform? And we can start with a blank piece of paper and we can do job analysis, asking ourselves these fundamental questions. And the end result of job analysis is a written job description that we can give to the employee, and we can say to the employee, this is your job, this is your role, this is what you're responsible for, this is what you're accountable for, and this is what we, the company, expect you, the employee, to achieve. AI is already making a big impact on job descriptions. AI now can write a job description on responsibilities and duties. It isn't able yet to go the extra mile and convert the duties and responsibilities into accountabilities. We still need human intervention to do that. But I reckon within 3 years, JA and JD will be 95% automated by AI. The primary purpose of the job description, to give it to the employee and say to the employee, this is your job, this is your role, these are your responsibilities, these are your accountabilities, and this is what we, the company, expect you, the employee, to achieve. And when we've got the job description, We can, of course, give the JD to the employee and let them know what we want them to do. And we can use that job description to determine the size of the job. Job evaluation. How big is the job? The size of the job. And the bigger the size, the bigger the points that the job scores, the bigger the grade. Internally, within the company, how do we determine the size of jobs? How do we put them into grades? We don't do compensation analysis job by job by job, function by function by function. No, that is an utter waste of time, and you'll end up with paralysis by analysis. We do compensation grade by grade by grade. And if I've got a grade 14, I will design for that grade a pay scale with a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum. And the vast majority of jobs in that grade will fit into the pay scale. If grade 14 is an accountant and an engineer and a software developer and a payroll administrator, they will all fit into that pay scale for grade 14. There'll be a very few exceptional handful of jobs that need to be paid slightly higher. For example, cybersecurity and AI jobs. We're looking at a 30% premium, but that is the exception. The majority of jobs will fit into the pay scale for that grade. So when we've got the job description, yes, we will then determine the size of the job internally, and based on the size, we'll put it into the grade, and for each grade, we'll have a pay scale. The secondary purpose of a job description: how do we evaluate jobs? The primary purpose of the job description: to give the JD to the employee and to communicate to the employee, this is your job, this is what you're responsible and accountable for, this is what we expect you to do. Let me come back to JE and grades. Job analysis, job descriptions, already 50% automated through AI. AI can write very good job descriptions on duties and responsibilities. It isn't able yet to convert the responsibilities to accountabilities, but hopefully within 3 years it will do that. And we're at the infancy stages of AI doing job evaluation and grades. The traditional methods of job evaluation, the top three, the Hay methodology, now owned, of course, by Korn Ferry, the Mercer methodology, the Towers-Watson methodology. These are the best three in that order. The best methodology is Hay. Second best is probably Mercer. Third best is Towers. They are still very much relevant in today's world. AI hasn't replaced them yet. But I reckon 3 years from now, AI will also be able to do job evaluation. And if you're keeping up to date in HR, keep an eye on Gradar.com. It is the infancy stages of using AI tools, using questionnaires to determine the size of a job using job evaluation. It's pretty good so far, but it has a way to go. But I reckon 3 years from now, it will be the most common methodology. At the moment, 65% of companies are using Hay. 15% of companies are using Mercer. 10% of companies are using Towers, 5% of companies are using Hewitt, and 5% of companies are using Gradar. But watch that 5% increase rapidly in the next 3 years. And based on the size of the job, you will put the job into a grade. And there have been huge trends in the number of grades in the past 20 years. Trends in the number of grades. And this is one that you really need to keep on top of. In the 1980s, the 1990s, companies had lots of grades. From the CEO at the top to the cleaner at the bottom, maybe between 18 and 24 grades. And in the 2000s, we did something called broad banding. And we merged 2 grades into one. And instead of having 18, we only had 9. Instead of having 24, we only had 12. But we realized by the end of the 2000s that broad banding was actually very expensive, and it was also really demotivating for employees, because employees got stuck in a grade for 5-6 years without a promotion. So in the 2010s, we started adding a few grades back in. Maybe we got back to 13 to 17 grades, but we've realized that's not enough. And now in the 2020s, we're going all the way back to lots of grades. We've gone full circle. Best practice on grades today is that you should have, from the CEO at the top to the cleaner at the bottom, lots of grades, at least 18, probably 20, where each grade is one hay level or one single step of job evaluation. One hay level or one Towers Watson global grade or one Mercer class. Double step grades or broad banded grades, we experimented with that in the 1990s, 2000s. It wasn't successful. We're now back to saying that best practice on grades within the company is to have lots of grades, i.e. 18 to 24, where each grade is a single hay level or a single Towers Watson global grade or a single Mercer class. The primary purpose of the job description is to give it to the employee and say to the employee, this is your job, this is what we expect you to do. And old-fashioned performance management, old-fashioned PM, from about 1986 when KPIs were invented until about 2017, you would have been using KRAs and KPIs, known worldwide. I could probably walk into a restaurant in Kathmandu and shout out, hey everybody, what is a KPI? And most people would know. KRA, Key Result Area. Why are you doing your job? KPI, the Key Performance Indicator. How will we measure when you've done your job successfully? And KPIs were typically annual targets. But we've moved on from then. By now, you should have moved forward to what I'll call modern performance management or agile performance management. From about 2018 until today, you should have replaced KPIs with MSCs, which are also known as OKRs. OKRs, objectives and key results. MSCs, what are the things that you must do if you want to meet expectations? What are the things that you should do if you want to exceed expectation? And what is the amazing thing that you could do if you want to be truly amazing, truly outstanding? MSCs, the modern approach to performance management. What must you achieve? Your goals, your objectives, and how must you achieve it? The behaviors, the competencies. What you must achieve, we've moved on from KPIs, we've moved on to MSCs and OKRs. How must you achieve it? Behaviors, competencies. Good performance management, OCD. O for objectives, C for competencies, spelled IES, and D for development. And good performance appraisal, objectives and competencies. Did you achieve your objectives? Did you show the right competencies, behaviors? In a typical modern performance appraisal, 70% of the weighting is on what you have achieved, and 30% of the weighting is on how you have achieved it. The end result of performance appraisal is performance ratings. We started with a 5-point scale in the 1980s. We experimented with a 4-point scale in the 1990s. It didn't work. We experimented with a 6-point scale in the 2010s. It didn't work. We are now back to a 5-point scale as best practice, where 3 is the goal. But we're using modern words. We've got rid of the old-fashioned words like outstanding, excellent, satisfactory, and we've replaced it with modern words. 3, well done. You've been successful. 3, satisfactory, was not very motivating. But 3, well done. You've been successful, much, much more motivating. 4, bravo, you've exceeded your goals and targets. 5, outstanding, you've significantly exceeded your goals and targets. 2, marginal, needs improvement, you've met most of your goals and targets, but not all of them. And 1, unsatisfactory, you failed to meet the minimum goals and targets. 5 points is back in fashion. And we're not going to have the distribution curve as the bell curve. No, that's a disaster. We're going to use the skewed curve, and we're going to use snap ratio. And all of this we'll explain in webinar 6 in August when we look at appraisals and distribution curves. And those ratings will then be used in the pay review, the annual merit pay review, moving people up the pay scale linked to performance, and in the end of year bonus allocation linked to performance. So yeah, performance ratings. There was a brief period of time in about 2021, 2022, when some companies abandoned ratings. But guess what? They're back in. You can't do pay reviews properly if you aren't able to identify who are the top performers. And you can't allocate bonuses fairly if you're not able to identify explicitly who are the top performers. Ratings are alive and well, typically 5 points, and pay for performance is alive and well. The big shift, we've moved on from KPIs to MSCs and OKRs, but so far AI has not had any impact on performance management and performance appraisal. And I don't think it will have any impact within the next 3 to 5 years. Yes, AI is having a big impact on JDs. It's starting to have an impact on JE, but no, it can't set goals. It can't measure behaviors. Not ready. Jobs are internal within the company. People and performance are internal within the company. Ratings, we briefly experimented abandoning them, but they're back in fashion. Ratings, we briefly experimented 6 points, 4 points, but we now realize that 5 points is the best. And ratings, we used to have the horrendous bell curve, but now we should have the skewed curve. Maximum of 5% of people outstanding, minimum of 9% of people marginal, and 1% of people underperforming. But exceeding will be about 30% skewed, leaving you with 55 satisfactory. This is best practice today for the limit of the skew in performance appraisals. And it has a snap ratio of 3.5. And we'll explain snap ratio in detail in the webinars during August. Pay reviews linked to the performance rating through merit pay, through merit matrices. Bonuses linked to the performance rating through the bonus distribution curve. And then, of course, there is the market, the external market. What is my company's pay strategy? Where am I going to get market data? How do I benchmark my company, my jobs, my grades with the market? And how do I know if I've designed my pay scales correctly, my allowances correctly, or do I need to review them and improve them? Underpinned, of course, by job evaluation. Job evaluation has a double impact. Internally, within the company, how do I size each job? And based on the size, how do I put it into a grade? But also externally, how do I compare my jobs, my grades with the market? Apple for apple, orange for orange, based on job size. So what's been happening in the last 5 years? Pay strategy, big changes. In the 2000s, we used to do pay strategy on what was called a comparator group, a group of maybe 9 to 17 companies, probably in the same industry sector. And we would aim to be P50 of that comparator group, but not anymore. Now, in the 2020s, we look at all organizations in the country. General industry. Who do I recruit from? Because I need to pay more from them. And who do staff resign and go and join? Because I better not be too far from them. And if we were a bank, P50 of banks is about the same as P75 of all orgs. And modern pay strategy is based on all organizations. And in the webinars in August, when we do the webinar, one of them will be dedicated to pay strategy. And we'll talk about which sectors pay more, which sectors pay less, what are percentiles, what are deciles, what does P50 mean, what does P75 mean, etc. But on strategy, we're not using comparator groups or industries anymore. We're using all orgs. It's more sustainable, it's easy to monitor year to year to year, and it's a lot less expensive. Where do we get market data? The best three sources. Of course, the best three sources continue to be Korn Ferry, Mercer, and Towers Watson. And maybe I'll add in Hewitt as well. How do we benchmark? How do we compare? How do we build the pay scales, the allowances, the pay ranges, the midpoint, the minimum, the maximum, the allowances, the benefits, etc., underpinned, of course, by job evaluation. So this is the golden triangle of reward. We've got to understand jobs, we've got to understand positions, we've got to know all about the people doing the jobs and how well they're performing, and we have to understand the pay market, the four P's: position, people, performance, and pay. On the market, AI is starting to have a small influence, but not much. AI cannot set the pay strategy. That needs full human interaction, but it can start to design the pay ranges and the allowances. If you feed AI with the market data, it can then build the ranges if you've told it what your strategy is. AI, it isn't going to influence goal setting or behaviors. It isn't going to influence pay strategy. It will, and it already has influenced JDs. It will start to influence JDs. It will start to influence pay reviews and bonuses. And this is the golden triangle of reward. And when we do the 12 webinars in August, we will go through this golden triangle. Webinar number 1 will be all about job analysis, job descriptions, and grades. Webinar number 2 will be all about job evaluation and job evaluation methodologies. And webinar number 3 will be all about building your internal grades from the CEO at the top to the cleaner at the bottom. How many grades should you have? Webinar number 4, what is a pay strategy? How do you set the strategy? Webinar number 5, how do you build your pay scales? Where do you get market data from? How do you design your pay ranges? And webinar number 6, how do you implement those ranges? How do you recruit people? How do you promote people? How do you progress people? What happens if a person hits the maximum of the pay scale? Webinar 7, performance management. Webinar 8, performance appraisal. And webinar 9, pay for performance. And then webinar 10, overlaying this, bonuses, short-term bonuses. Webinar 11, sales incentive plans. And webinar 12, recognition and retention plans. The 12 webinars coming up next month in August will take us through this golden triangle. 2 hours for each webinar, 3 webinars a week, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, 4 weeks. They are going to be amazing. Now, this whole golden triangle, I could express it in a different way. If I was holding in my hands a solid lump of metal and I had to put a price, a value on that lump of metal, I'd probably want to ask myself some questions about that lump of metal. What is it made of? How heavy is it? What's the quality? And what's the market price today? Describe, weigh, quality, value. And if I said this lump of metal was solid gold, and it's 200 grams weight, and it's 21 carat purity, and the market price today of gold is $20 a gram, I now know that this lump of metal, this lump of gold, is worth $4,000. If instead of being a lump of metal, we're talking about an employee, how much should I pay for a job? How valuable? What should I pay for an employee? I'm actually going to ask myself the same four questions. Describe, weigh, quality, value. If I'm looking at a job thinking, how much should I be paying? If I'm looking at an employee thinking, what should I be paying them? The same four questions. Describe, weigh, quality, market value. Describe the job they're doing. That's org design and job descriptions. And that will be webinar number 1 in August. Weigh the job they're doing. Job evaluation and grades. That will be webinar number 2 on JE and webinar number 3 on grades. What's the quality of the person doing the job? That will be webinar 6 on performance management, webinar 7 on PM, webinar 8 on performance appraisal, and webinar 10 on pay for performance. And what's the market value? Webinar 4 on pay strategy, webinar 5 on designing the pay scales, the minimum, the midpoint, the maximum using market data, and webinar 6 on implementing the pay scales. Plus, of course, webinar 10 on bonuses, webinar 11 on sales incentives, and webinar 12 on recognition and reward. We're going to go through the golden triangle through this series of 12 webinars during August. So, yeah, we've talked about the golden triangle. Yes. We've looked at jobs. Yes. We've looked at managing people and performance and the latest trends. Yes. And we've looked at market compensation, benchmarking, design, where the trends are. We're not going to benchmark on comparator groups anymore. We're moving towards all orgs and pay scales. Yes, a lot of companies are still using 80-120, but by now you should be exploring 70-130 or even the advanced pay scale, 67-133, min, max. All of that we'll cover in the webinars. So what exactly are these webinars coming up in August? The Masters series of 12 webinars next month. Webinar 1, job descriptions, job analysis. Webinar 2, JE. Webinar 3, grades. Webinar 4, strategy. Webinar 5, design. Webinar 6, implement. Webinar 7, performance management. Webinar 8, performance appraisal. Webinar 9, pay for performance. And then 10 bonuses, 11 incentives, 12 recognition and retention. We've got deep dive courses coming up in November, December. If you really want to become an expert and you want to specialize in Comp and Ben, or you're an HR generalist and you need a deep dive understanding of Comp and Ben, well, we've done the July course in London is coming up next month. 4 days in London aimed at the Middle East, 27th, 28th, 29th, 30th of July. And then there's a lot of courses coming up in November. Job analysis, job description, job evaluation and grades, org design, structure analysis, long-term incentive plans, performance management, performance appraisal, all in November, some in Dubai. And then it could be Dubai, it could also be Abu Dhabi, to be determined. Then off to Riyadh to do my 2 most famous courses, job evaluation and grades and compensation in November, and then back to Dubai to do those tour courses again because they'll be so busy, job evaluation and compensation in Dubai in December. These are the deep dive certified courses. But of course, coming up next month in August, we've got the Masters series of webinars. 12 webinars, each webinar 2 hours, 3 webinars all about jobs, 3 webinars all about pay and compensation, 3 webinars all about performance, and 3 webinars all about the variable elements: bonuses, sales incentives, recognition and retention. The 12 webinars coming up in August. They'll be on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday each week. They'll probably be from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock UAE time. If you can't attend some of the webinars, then the video recordings will be made available so you can catch up. But it'll be a maximum of 6 video recordings. So if you're attending all 12, you do need to attend at least 6 of them face-to-face in person. The 12 webinars in August. And they are amazing value. I think each webinar is $95. You can build your own package. You can choose which webinars you want to attend. Or if you attend 6 webinars, you only have to pay for 5. And here is the amazing deal. You can attend all webinars for the cost of 9. That's 9 lots of $95. That is only $855. It is by far the best value training courses that I offer at any point during the year. And these are only offered through Informa in the Middle East. Here's the web link where you can register, you can build your own package. You can either choose the webinars individually or choose 6 for the price of 5. Most people actually choose all 12 for the price of 9. I cannot tell you how excited I am. You can probably tell from my voice. These are fun. 12 webinars, 2 hours each during August. So that is the content of my webinar today. And of course, this webinar today is also the introduction webinar for all 12 of these webinars in August. So if you are attending any of the paid webinars in August, please watch this introduction webinar first, because it will really reduce the time we have to spend at the beginning of each webinar introducing the subject. And this free webinar today, hopefully it's told you a little bit more about the fundamentals of compensation, the golden triangle. And hopefully, if you want to dive a little bit deeper, come on the webinars. And if you really want to dive deep, come on the 4-day courses in July, November, and December. So that is a good place to open it up for questions and answers. Remember, these are only 2-hour webinars. They're not going to make you a total expert overnight. If you want to become a total expert, not only should you do the webinars initially, but do the deep dive sessions as well. And that will help you get full expertise.
What if you and your team can be even more informed, competitive, accomplished, even more successful, with programs designed to inspire and empower everyone to become even more? Introducing Informa Connect Academy. With hundreds of global, digital, and in-person training courses led by world-renowned industry experts, reimagining learning experiences for even more unlocked potential. Informa Connect Academy, available at informaconnect.com/academy.